says is crucial.
Well, let's bring in our political panel. We are joined by Liberal MP Jason Falinski and also joined by Labor MP Josh Wilson, who is in the Shadow Assistant Minister for the Environment. Good morning to you both and welcome.
Morning, happy Diwali.
Happy Diwali. We'll come to domestic issues in just a moment, but it'd be great to just get your thoughts both on President Trump. We just heard from him in the last hour. It's the first time he's spoken since the US election. He's been pretty quiet up until now. It's been an extraordinary week. Josh Wilson, I'd just like to get your take on this transition period that we're seeing play out in the United States.
Well, it's been an interesting couple of weeks in US politics. I'm glad that the result is now clear and President-elect Joe Biden will move forward towards his inauguration in January. He seems to be going about building the personnel will be part of his administration in a calm and steady way. I'm really glad that one of the key indications he's given is that the United States intends to get back into the Paris Climate Accord and therefore be part of the necessary effort on a global basis to address climate change. And that's great for the global community. It obviously puts a focus on Australia because if the US, like Japan and New Zealand and Germany and France and many other countries, is going to commit to net zero emissions by 2050, that makes Australia a stark outlier on that issue. And I hope that the Morrison government will change its tune in 2021 because we need to make a start on taking serious action to address climate change.
Jason, can I put that to you? To what extent does Joe Biden's new leadership put pressure on Australia to change its policies?
Well, I don't think it puts pressure on us. I think it's actually a continuation of what we've been doing. So we're really comfortable with the Biden administration or what Joe Biden's been saying on the climate change. A lot of it is exactly what we've been doing. It's stress on technology. He's re-entering the Paris Agreement, which of course we've always been a member of. It was the Liberal Party that signed up to the Paris Accord. So I think these are positive things. It's good this is a global problem. It's not a problem that just Australia can fix. And so it's very important that we have the United States back at the table, showing leadership on this issue. And I think that their approach is very similar to the approach that Australia has taken.
But Jason, isn't it sort of important to commit to a target by 2050 when particularly you have people from, say, the Climate Council, senior researcher there, Tim Baxter, estimates that if Australia followed its current path, that it would hit net zero by 2393?
Yeah, look, those statistics are just simply put not right. But your broader point is, I think, a correct one, which is that we need to have in place where we want to be by what time period. Now, we've put in place a whole series of announcements this year and last year about the things that the federal government is doing in conjunction with the states to ensure that we get to a period where we can announce as the Prime Minister at what point we'll be getting to net zero. Now, the Prime Minister has said that he'd like to get to net zero before 2050 if possible. The Paris Agreement says that you need to be at net zero in the second half of this century. We will do that quite easily, but clearly we would like to be one of those countries that are at the front of the pack on this issue, and showing leadership where we can.
All right, let's move back home now. Josh Wilson, you're in Fremantle. It's a very big day in Western Australia today with the border opening. Can you tell us, do you think the state's ready to have some travellers coming back to open up to the rest of Australia?
Yes, we're very ready. We're looking forward to it, and we've laid the foundation for that to occur with the excellent approach to managing the virus here in Western Australia. I think among the best approaches in terms of state and territory jurisdictions in Australia. We've had a really great approach to managing the health issue and therefore living lives in sort of terms of social and economic activity in a way that's been only lightly affected, other than key industries like tourism and international education. So off the foundation of the excellent work that Mark McGowan and Roger Cook have done, we're now looking forward to easing the borders as we said we would do.
Josh, as we know, this hard border has somewhat gone to a softer border, not accepting people from Victoria or New South Wales unless they go into their own self-quarantine. When Melbourne's just clocked up its 15th day of 0 cases, what are the justifications for not allowing this border opening up to those states?
Well, the justifications, I guess, are twofold. The first is that Western Australia's response has been at the very top of the tree. We've managed the virus excellently well here in Western Australia, and on that basis, people in WA trust the WA government to continue to make decisions based on expert medical advice. What we do know about this virus is it's incredibly dangerous. When it gets off the leash, it spreads like wildfire, and it does enormous harm. So we should proceed cautiously. That's what we're going to do. The alternative approach has been put by the Morrison government at various times, by the Liberals here in WA, who are calling for the border to come down altogether back in July and August. They joined Clive Palmer in his ridiculous High Court challenge to Western Australia's border approach. Fortunately, that was resisted. People in WA won't forget that in a hurry, I can tell you. But we now move forward from having managed the health impacts excellently well, which means our economic performance, our economic activity has also been sort of relatively unaffected. That's been good for people in WA. Frankly, it's also been good for Australia because WA represents such a large part of Australia's export profile.
Jason, as we open up to the west, New South Wales or people from Greater Sydney still can't go north to Queensland. What's your position on these borders remaining closed? And I wonder if you could also, turn your attention to the international borders and give us a little bit of an insight into the next steps for Australia opening up.
Yeah. Look, Josh and I vehemently disagree on this and have met in Parliament House over a coffee and disagreed on it. I think that this has been a very sorry tale in Australia's history. What is going on and at the moment is being done purely for politics. We know that actually closing borders down is not the best way to deal with this virus. It is one of the instruments or tools that you need, but the best way to deal with this virus is actually testing, tracking and tracing. We know that. We have seen that with other epidemics. So this is nothing new. And what some of the state premiers have done, while very popular, is incredibly divisive. And when Josh says, Western Australians won't forget that the federal government intervened in a High Court case on a constitutional matter, that is, I think, quite disingenuous, but also just points to the fact that this is and has always been about politics and not about health. And that's disappointing. In terms of internationally, what is happening? Well, we, as you know, are underwriting a whole bunch of commercial flights from South Africa, from North America and for England. We want to get families back to Australia. We are underwriting the cost of that. We are working as closely as we can with state governments to increase the amount of people that can come back through the hotel quarantine system. Victoria is still offline. Hopefully they will come back online very soon. New South Wales is carrying the overwhelming burden of that, but we would still like to see them do more. And of course, we'd like to see the other state. I mean, at the moment, we have quotas in Queensland and Western Australia that make it literally uncommercial and impossible for anyone to go to those states, to fly to those states. So they may as well not have those quotas at all. They need to be upped because at the moment, what we're doing is we're dividing Australian families and Australians from one another. And I don't think any government should be in that business whatsoever.
Just before we head to Josh to get his response there on some of those issues and Labor's response to the international borders, we heard from the Prime Minister yesterday, Jason, that prioritised getting all Australians home ahead of international students. Does it have to be as binary as that? Is it one or the other? Or could the government or should the government consider perhaps what's called a safe corridor to bring some of these students back, particularly when it could amount to something like $11 billion hit to the economy?
Well, look, Joe, can I tell you, I absolutely agree with you on that. I think that we should be doing as much as we possibly can to get overseas students back to Australia, not because of the economic costs of it, but because of the benefits that Australia gains as a nation and that our region gains from being able to help people from other parts of the world gain an education here in Australia. Before the Thai king became king, he was actually educated at Duntroon. He has given several speeches about how warmly he regards Australia because of his time here where he got a degree. And I know that to be the case in lots of parts of China, Japan, South Korea, Indonesia. It's an incredibly important part of our contribution to our region and to our future in terms of our economic development, because we will have those connections in place. But it's once again, it's about what, the richest countries in the world are not the ones that have all the treasure. The richest countries in the world are the ones who can give more to those who have less. And our education system is one of the best in the world, and we should offer as much as we can to other people from other parts of the world. And so that's why I think what you say is very important. And I do know that the government is looking at all sorts of different schemes to try and get that back up and running.
Josh Wilson, can we go to you for the final word? If you want to respond there to Jason's comments, I know how important the international student sector is to WA. How should the government be navigating this?
Well, I don't think the kinds of things that need to be done are really in question. It's a case of getting on with it. We heard from Jason earlier on climate change. They're sort of making announcements, looking at a package, talking to people, thinking about a process that may eventually get them to a point where they could consider how you might get to net zero by 2050. With international students, it's the same sort of thing. The university sector has been talking to the government with a whole series of proposals around how you could start to get international students into the country in a safe way. We're just not seeing any progress. Of course, the priority, though, does have to be on the 36,000 Australians who still are unable to return, including 8,000 who are medically or financially vulnerable. The government does seem to be able to sort of move heaven and earth from time to time on things that they really focus on. This seems to be one of those ones that's fallen through the cracks, and I don't see why. They've been a big one for setting deadlines. The sort of let's get certain things done by Christmas is one of them. Let's get those people home by Christmas.
OK, Josh Wilson and Jason Falinski, thank you very much for joining us today on Weekend Breakfast.
Thank you, guys.
And some very raucous birds in the back. I think that they were having to compete
waking up
with
in
there.
Fremantle.